This is very important, said Medivh, staggering slightly as he slid from the back of the griffin. He looked haggard, and Khadgar assumed the battle with the demon had been worse than even he let on. I will be unavailable for a few days, continued the older mage. If any messengers arrive during the time, I want you to keep track of my correspondence. I can do that, said Khadgar, easily. No, you can't, said Medivh, starting roughly down the stairs. That is why I need to tell you how to read the ones with the purple seal. The purple seal is always order business. Khadgar said nothing this time, but just nodded. Medivh slid on the edge of the stairs and stumbled, pitching forward headlong. Khadgar lunged to grab the older man, but the magus had already caught himself against the wall and pulled himself upright. He didn't miss a beat. In the library there is a scroll. The Song of Agwin tells of my mother's battle with Sargeras. The scroll that Guzba wanted a copy of, said Khadgar, now watching the mage carefully as he lurched down the stairs ahead of him. The very one, said Medivh. This is why he can't have it. We use it as cipher for order communications. It is the master key. An identical scroll is with each of the members of the order. If you take the standard alphabet and move everything down, so the first letter is represented by the 4th, or the 10th, or the 20th, it's a simple code, you understand. Khadgar started to say he did, but Medivh was already hurrying on, almost urgent in his need to explain. The scroll is the key, he repeated. At the top of the message, you'll see what looks like a date. It's not. It's a reference to the stanza, line, and word you start at. The first letter of that word becomes the first letter of the alphabet in the code. From there it proceeds normally. The next letter in the alphabet progression would be the second letter of the alphabet, and so on. I understand. No, you don't, said Medivh, rushed now and tired. That's the cipher for the first sentence only. When you hit a punctuation mark, you go to the second letter in the word. That becomes the equivalent for the first letter of the alphabet for the cipher of that sentence. Punctuation is normal. Numbers are as well, but they're supposed to write things out, not use numerals. There's something else, but I'm missing it. They were outside Medivh's personal quarters now. Morose was already present, with a robe slung over his arm and a covered bowl resting on an ornate table. From the doorway, Khadgar could smell the rich broth rising from the bowl. What should I do once I decipher the message? Asked Khadgar. Right, said Medivh, as if some vital connection had snapped closed in his mind. Delay. Delay first. Day or two. I may be up to it after that. Then equivocate. I am out on business, may return any time. Use the same cipher as you got, but make sure you mark it as the date. If all else fails, delegate. Tell whoever it is to use their own judgment, and I will lend what aid I can at the soonest moment. They always love that. Do not tell them I am indisposed. The last time I mentioned that, a horde of would-be clerics arrived to minister to my needs. I'm still missing silverware from that little visit. The old mage took a deep breath and seemed to deflate, supporting himself against the doorframe. Morose did not move, but Khadgar took a step forward. The fight with the demon, said Khadgar. It was bad, wasn't it? I fought worse. Demons, slope-shouldered, ram-headed brutes, equal parts shadow and fire. More beast than human. More raw bile than both. Nasty claws. That's what you watch out for, the claws. Khadgar nodded. How did you defeat it? Massive trauma usually will force out the life essence, said Medivh. In this case, I took its head off. Khadgar blinked. You didn't have a sword. Medivh smiled wearily. Did I say I needed a sword? Enough. More questions when I'm up to it. And with that, he stepped into the room, and the ever-faithful Morose closed the door on Khadgar. The last sound the youth heard was the exhausted groan of an old man who had finally found a resting place. A week passed. and Medivh had not emerged from his quarters. Morose would shuffle upstairs with a daily bowl of broth. Finally, Khadgar summoned sufficient nerve to look in. The Castellan made no move to protest, other than a monosyllabic recognition of his presence there. In repose, Medivh looked ghastly, the light gone out of his shuttered eyes, the tension of life gone from his visage. He was dressed in a long nightshirt, propped up against the headboard, supported by pillows, his mouth open, his face pale, his usually animate form thin and haggard. Morose would carefully spoon the broth into Medivh's mouth, and he would swallow, but otherwise not awaken. The Castellan would change the bedding as well, then retire for the day. Khadgar got a frisson of recognition and wondered if this was the same scene that played out in Medivh's youth, when his powers first surfaced, and when Lothar tended to him. He wondered how long the Magus would truly be out, how much energy had the battle with the demon taken out of him. Normal communications came in, written in common hand and clear language. Some were delivered by Griffin Rider, others by horseback, and more than a few came with the regular supply of wagons of traders, seeking to fill Moreau's larders. They were for the most part mundane, ship movements and troop drills, readiness reports, an occasional discovery of an ancient tome or forgotten artifact, or the recovery of a time-worn legend. The sighting of a waterspout, or a great sea turtle, or a crimson tide. Sketches of fauna that may have been new to the observer, but were better duplicated in the bestiaries already in the library. And mention of the orcs, in an ever-increasing numbers, particularly from the east. Rising sightings of them in the vicinity of the Black Morass. Increased guards on the caravans, locations of temporary camps, reports of raids, robberies, and mysterious disappearances. An increase in refugees heading for the protection of the larger walled towns and cities, and sketches from the survivors and the slant-browed, heavy-jawed creatures, including a detailed description of the powerful muscular systems that, Khadgar realized with a start, could only come from vivisecting the subject. Khadgar began to read the mail to the wizard as he slept, reading aloud the more interesting or humorous bits. The magus made no response to encourage the younger mage, but neither did he forbid it. The first purple sealed letter arrived, and Khadgar was immediately lost. Some of the letters made sense, but others quickly descended into gibberish. At first, the younger mage panicked, sure that he had misunderstood some basic instruction. After a day of littering the quarters with notes and failed attempts, Khadgar realized what he'd been missing, that the space between the words was considered a letter in the order's cipher, shifting everything one more letter in the process. Once that realization dawned, the missive deciphered easily. It was less impressive than it had seemed earlier when it was gibberish. A note from the far south, the peninsula of Almet Thonder, noting that all was quiet. There were no signs of orcs, though there were a rise in the number of jungle trolls as of late, and that a new comet was visible along the southern horizon, with detailed notes, written out in words, not numbers. No response was requested, and Khadgar set it and its translation aside. Khadgar wondered why the order did not use a magical encoding or spell-based script. Perhaps not all members of the Order of Tirisfal were mages, or that they were trying to hide it from other wizards, like Guzba, and putting it in a magical script would draw their curiosity like bees to nectar. Most likely, Khadgar decided, it was out of Medivh's sheer cussedness to the point of making the other members of the order use a poem praising his mother as the key. A large package arrived from Lothar, distilling the previously reported orc sightings and attacks and translating them into a large map. Indeed, it seemed like armies of orcs were pouring into the swampy territory of the Black Morass itself. Again, no response was asked. Khadgar considered sending Lothar a note regarding Medivh's state, but thought better of it. What could the champion do, in any event, other than worry? He did send a note, over his own signature, thanking him for the information and asking to be kept apprised. Many held nothing but pedantic advice, pointing out in detail how this candidate or that would be a perfect apprentice. Those were mostly unopened, he noticed. And then there were the continual reports of no news, no changes, nothing out of the ordinary. The latter changed with the more recent messages. They were not dated, but Khadgar began to determine where they fell within a timeline, both by the yellowing of the parchment and the increasing fever pitch of demands and advice. The tone became more consolatory with the sudden appearance of the orcs, particularly as they started raiding caravans, but the undercurrent of demands on Medivh's time remained and even increased. Khadgar looked at the old man lying on the bed and wondered what would possess him to help these people and help them on a regular basis. And then there were the mystery letters, the occasional thanks, the references to some arcane text, a response to an unknown question, yes, no, and the emu, of course. During his vigil at Medivh's bedside, one mystery letter arrived, without signature. It read, "Prepare quarters. The emissary will arrive shortly." At the end of the third week, 2 letters arrived one evening with a traveling merchant, one with the purple seal, the other red sealed, and addressed to Khadgar himself. Both were from the Violet Citadel of Kirin-Tor. The letter to Khadgar began in a spidery hand. "We regret to inform you of the sudden and unexpected death of the instructor mage Guzba. We understand you have been in correspondence with the late mage, and we share your emotion and sympathy at this time. If you have any correspondence, monies, or information currently due to Guzba, or are in possession of any of his property, in particular any of his books on the loan, the return of that correspondence, money, information, or property would be appreciated, sent to the below address." A set of numbers and a lazy, illegible scrawl marked the bottom of the letter. Khadgar felt as if he had been struck in the gut. Guzba dead? He turned the letter over, but no further information fell out. Stunned, he reached for the purple sealed letter. This was in the same spider hand, but once it was decoded, held more information. Guzba was found slain in the library on the eve of the Feast of Scribes, in the midst of a reviewing Denbron's treatise on the Song of Agwin. Khadgar felt a pang of remorse for not sending his former instructor the scroll. He was apparently taken by surprise from a beast, presumably summoned, which ripped him apart. The death was quick but painful, and the explanation of how the body was found detailed to the point of excess. From the description of the body and the shambles of the library, Khadgar could only conclude that the summoned beast was a demon of the type Medivh had fought in Stormwind. The letter continued, the words maintaining a cold, analytical tone that Khadgar found excessive. The writer noted that this was the 7th death within the year of a mage of the Violet Citadel, including that of the Archmage Erexis. It went on further to note that this was the first death of this type where the victim was not a member of the order itself. The writer wanted to know if Medivh had been in contact with Guzba, either directly or through his apprentice. Khadgar had a moment of deja vu, looking at his own name in print. The unknown author went forward to speculate that since he was not a member of the order, Guzba might be responsible for the summoning of the beast for some other matter, and if this was the case, then Medivh should be aware that Khadgar had been Guzba's student at one point. Khadgar felt a sharp pain of anger. How dare this mysterious writer? It had to be someone high within the Kirin-Tor hierarchy, but Khadgar had no idea who. impinged that both Guzba and himself. Khadgar wasn't even present when Guzba was killed. Perhaps this writer was the one responsible, or someone like Corrigan. The librarian was always researching demon worshippers, casting accusations about like that. Khadgar shook his head and took a deep breath. No, such speculation was futile and fueled only by personal indignation, like so much of the politics of the Kirin Tor. The anger faded to sadness in realization that the mighty mages of the Violet Citadel were unable to stop this, that 7 wizards, 6 of them members of the supposedly secret and powerful order, had died, and all this writer could do was cast about aspersions in the desperate hope that there would be no additional deaths. Khadgar thought of Medivh's quick and decisive actions at Stormwind Keep, and marveled that there was no one of equal wit, drive, and intelligence within his own community. The young mage picked up the encoded letter and examined it in the wan candlelight. The Feast of Scribes was over a month and a half ago. It took this long for the message to cross the sea and reach them overland. A month and a half, before Huglar and Huggerin were killed in Stormwind, and if the same demon was involved, or even the same summoner, it would have to move between these 2 points very, very swiftly. Some of the demons in the vision had wings. Was it possible for such a beast to move between the locations without anyone spotting it? An errant and unexpected breeze wafted through. The hairs on the back of Khadgar's neck began to bristle, and he looked up in time to see the figure manifest within the room. First there was smoke, red as blood, bubbling out from some pinprick hole in the universe. It coiled and curdled itself like milk rising through water, quickly forming a swirling mass through which stepped the looming form of a great demon. Its form was reduced from when Khadgar had seen it before, on the field of snow in the time-lost vision. It had shrunk itself to allow it to fit within the confines of the room. Still, its flesh was of bronze, its armor of jet-black iron, and its beard and hair of animated fire. Huge horns erupting from a massive brow, it was weaponless, but it seemed to need no weapons, for it moved with the comfortable grace of a predator that feels nothing. Sargeras. Khadgar was stunned into silence and immobility. Surely the words Medivh had maintained would keep such a beast at bay. Yet here it was, entering the tower, entering the mage's very room with the ease of a noble entering a commoner's shack. But the Lord of the Burning Legion did not look around, instead glided to the foot of the bed. He stood there for a long moment, the flames of his beard and hair flickering without sound, as he regarded the unconscious form before him. The demon stood watching the sleeping mage. Khadgar held his breath and looked around the work table. A few tomes, the candle backlit by a mirror for greater illumination. A letter opener used to break the purple seals. The young mage slowly reached for the opener, trying to move without attracting the great demon's attention. His fingers wrapped around it, tightly, his knuckles white. Still Sargeras stood at the foot of the bed. A long moment passed, and Khadgar tried to will himself to move, either to flee or to attack. His muscles felt locked in position. Medivh shifted in his bedding, mumbling something unheard. The demon lord raised a hand slowly, as if to pronounce a benediction on the mage's inert form. Khadgar gave a strangled cry and thrust himself up from his chair, letter opener clutched in his hand. Only at this moment did he realize he held the opener in the wrong hand. The demon looked up, and it was a lazy, smooth motion, as if the demon himself was sleeping or far underwater. It regarded the charging youth, hand raised in a clumsy attack with a short, sharp dagger. The demon smiled. Medivh shifted and muttered in his sleep. Khadgar drove the letter opener into the demon's chest and through the creature's body entirely. The thrust of his blow carried him forward through the form of Sargeras and sent him spinning toward the opposite wall. Unable to stop, he slammed into the wall, and the letter opener jangled to the stone floor. Medivh's eyes popped open, and the guardian sat up. "Morose, Khadgar, are you here?" Khadgar pulled himself to his feet, looking around. The demon had vanished, popped like a soap bubble at the first touch of steel. He was alone in the room with Medivh. "What are you doing on the floor, lad?" said Medivh. "Morose could have gotten you a cot." "Master, your wards," said Khadgar. "They have failed." He stumbled for a moment, unsure that he should reveal he knew Sargeras by appearance. Medivh would catch something like that and pester him until he revealed how he knew it. "A demon," he managed. "There was a demon here." Medivh smiled, looking well rested, the color returning to his face. "A demon? I think not. Hold." The magus closed his eyes and nodded. "No, the wards are still in place. It would take more than a cat nap for them to run out of energy. What did you see?" Quickly, Khadgar recounted the appearance of the demon from the cloud of boiling red milk, of it standing there, of it raising its hand. The magus shook his head. "I think that was another one of your visions," he said at last. "Some bit of time unstuck and displaced, that fell into the tower, quickly vanished." "But the demon," started Khadgar. "The demon you described is no more, at least no more in this life," said Medivh. "He was slain before I was born, buried far beneath the sea. Your vision was of Sargeras, the song of Agwin. You have the scrolls there. Deciphering messages? Yes. Perhaps that's what called that time-lost wraith into my quarters. You should not be doing work here while I sleep." He frowned slightly, as if he was thinking if he should be more upset or not. "I'm sorry. I thought it would be best to not leave you alone." Khadgar twisted into a question, and it sounded a bit foolish. Medivh chuckled and let a smile creep across his weathered features. "Well, I didn't say you couldn't, and I don't suppose Morose would have stopped you, since it would reduce his need to be here." He rubbed a finger and thumb over his lips and through his beard. "I think I've had enough broth for one lifetime. And just to reassure you, I will check the tower's mystic wards and show you how to do it as well. Now, aside from demon visions, did anything happen while I was gone?" Khadgar summarized the messages he had received: the rising tide of orc incidents, Lothar's map, the mystery message about the emissary, and the news of Guzba's death. Medivh grunted at the description of Guzba's passing and said, "So they're going to blame Guzba until the next poor sod gets sliced open." He shook his head, then added, "Feast of the Scribes. That would be before Huglar and Huggerin died." "By about a week and a half," said Khadgar. "Time enough for a demon to fly from Dalaran to Stormwind Keep. Or a man on Griffinback," mused Medivh. "It's not all demons and magic in this world. Sometimes a simpler answer suffices. Anything else?" "It sounds like those orcs are becoming much more numerous and dangerous," said Khadgar. "Lothar says they are moving from caravan raids to attacks on settlements. Small ones, but there are more people coming into Stormwind and the other cities all the time as a result." "Lothar worries too much," said Medivh, with a grimace. "He's concerned," said Khadgar flatly. "He doesn't know what to expect next." "On the contrary," said Medivh, letting out a long, mournful sigh. "If everything you tell me is true, then I'm afraid things are going just the way I expected."